the day the weapon died. The Omega Lance had been forged in the heart of a dying star, assembled in orbit over 27 years by the combined efforts of 37 civilizations. It was, according to the Threx Dominion warlords, the final word in warfare. From the observation deck of the Coalition flagship Eminence, Captain Eli Vance watched the weapon prime itself. Energy bled into the void in shimmering arcs. The magnetic containment rings glowed white-hot as power levels climbed. All across the fleet, alien commanders spoke in their native tongues, guttural growls, clicking pulses, warbling tones, all expressing the same anticipation. In theory, the Omega Lance could erase a planet in one shot. The target, the enemy's fortress world, Zorith Prime, had withstood centuries of siege. Today it would burn. Firing sequence initiated, droned the Threx artillery officer. His armor gleamed black in the dim light, every movement precise. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The viewports darkened to protect eyes from the coming glare. 6, 5, 4. The Coalition fleet held its breath. 3, 2, 1. A spear of white fire burst from the Omega Lance. It tore through the darkness like a god's judgment, a beam so bright that it painted the hulls of nearby ships in stark shadows. Eli felt the deck vibrate under his boots. The beam struck Zorith Prime dead center. The planet's shields flared against the impact, arcs of energy scattering into space. The glow built brighter, brighter still. And then it died. Not an explosion. Not the annihilation they'd promised. The beam guttered like a candle in the wind, collapsing into a sputtering trail of plasma. When the light faded, Zorith Prime still hung in the void. Smoke curled from a single crater no bigger than a Terran football stadium. A wound, yes, but hardly fatal. The silence on the eminence was deafening. Then the shouting began. "This is sabotage," hissed Admiral Krell of the Vrakan, his mandibles clattering. "No other explanation." "Your engineers botched the calibration," snarled General Torgash of the Threx. The Ral Thursday delegation, pale, amphibious beings, whispered among themselves, already weighing terms for surrender. Eli leaned on the railing, studying the crater. A planet killer reduced to the destructive power of an old Earth bunker buster. The enemy would be laughing. "They'll be coming for us now," muttered Lieutenant Marisol Vega beside him. Her dark eyes flicked to the incoming tactical readouts. "They won't give us time to regroup." "Exactly," Eli said. His voice was calm, almost too calm. The Coalition commanders were still arguing, their words dissolving into pure chaos. Some blamed faulty power cells, others a spy within their ranks. The enemy fortress had survived, which to them meant the war was lost. Eli didn't see it that way. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "open the armory inventory. Show me crate 47B. She blinked. "Sir, 47B? That's... humor me." A holographic display shimmered to life, revealing a sealed container deep in the human fleet's supply hold. The image resolved into an absurd-looking frame of carbon titanium struts, massive elastic gravitic bands, and a launch cradle the size of a dropship. Marisol stared. "You can't be serious." "I am." Eli turned from the viewport, watching the alien leaders bicker. The Omega Lance failed. They think it's over. That's because they've never been on the losing side with humans. She gave a humorless laugh. "You're talking about the jungle trick." "Yup." Years ago, Eli had commanded a detachment in the deep Amazon during a Black Ops mission. Outnumbered and outgunned, they'd built oversized slingshots from scavenged drone struts and shock absorption bands. The result? An enemy convoy disabled by nothing more than hyper-accelerated chunks of scrap. Primitive in concept, devastating in execution. "This is a galactic war, Captain," Marisol reminded him. "Not a campfire story." Eli's smile didn't reach his eyes. "War's the same game, no matter the board. You just have to throw the right stone." He straightened and addressed the nearest Threx officer. "General, if you're done shouting, I have a counterattack plan." The towering alien turned, eyes narrowing. "Does it involve actual weapons, human?" "It involves the simplest weapon in the galaxy," Eli said, "scaled up until it scares gods." The room went silent. Even the Ral Thursday stopped muttering. "A slingshot," Eli said flatly. The reaction was immediate, chittering laughter from the insectoids, outright scoffs from the amphibians, low growls from the Threx. "You cannot be serious," Admiral Krell sneered. "Oh, I'm serious." Eli stepped forward, bringing up a tactical projection. Your Omega Lance failed because it played by the rules. Massive power buildup, detectable from light years away. The enemy was ready for it. Shields tuned for beam energy. He tapped the hologram. The image shifted to a spinning tungsten slug, jagged, dense, ugly. This won't give them a warning. No energy signature. No time to react. Just a chunk of metal moving so fast their shields don't know it's there until it's already inside their reactor core. General Torgash leaned in, interest cutting through his scorn. "And you can build such a thing? With your engineers' help?" "In less than 2 days," Eli said. "We've got the frame. We've got the gravitic bands. All we need is the guts to fire it." Marisol met his gaze, the faintest grin on her face now. "And I assume you already have a name for the projectile." Eli nodded. "David Stone." No one laughed this time. Outside the viewport, Zorath Prime's fortress lights twinkled in defiance. Eli Vance just stared back. In his mind, he could already hear the snap of the bands and the whisper of a slug crossing the void at impossible speed. The Omega Lance had failed. Now it was humanity's turn. The deathworld solution. 2 days later, the forward assembly bay of the human cruiser Resolute looked more like a scrapyard than a military facility. Sheets of scorched alloy lay in piles. Plasma welders sparked in the gloom. Alien engineers hovered on anti-grav lifts, their delicate appendages working with surgical precision, while human marines in grease-stained armor hammered, bolted, and cursed in equal measure. At the center of it all stood the frame, a towering Y-shaped construct of reinforced carbon titanium struts, bolted into a gimbaled launch cradle. Twin gravitic tension bands, each as thick as a tree trunk, stretched between the arms. It was a slingshot, a colossal, utterly absurd slingshot. "Angle is 2 degrees off," Lieutenant Marisol Vega called from the upper scaffolding. Her voice was barely audible over the hiss of welders and the clang of tools. "If we fire like this, we'll miss the target by 5,000 clicks." A Vrakan engineer chittered in annoyance, adjusting the magnetic couplings with a twitch of his blade-like limbs. "Your human tolerances are uncomfortably precise. That's why they work," Marisol shot back. Eli Vance moved through the chaos with the calm of a man who'd spent his life in worse conditions. In the Amazon, in the Hindu Kush, on the frozen hell of Europa's mining colonies, improvisation had always been humanity's greatest weapon. Here, it would be no different. The Coalition's other races still thought the plan was madness. But the Threx warlords, to their credit, had stopped mocking and started supplying materials when they saw the raw kinetic potential of the design. Even they understood the principle. If you throw something fast enough, no shield in the galaxy can stop it. Eli stopped beside the weapons base, where a Ral Thursday technician was inspecting the power feed for the grav bands. The amphibian's wide eyes blinked twice. "This will hold." "It'll hold," Eli said. "The frame can take a launch stress of 1,500 gravs. The bands will stretch to 60 meters under tension. The slug will leave the cradle at Mach 200. The Ral Thursday whistled softly. "That is not survivable. That's the point." The projectile, David Stone, was still being prepped in a sealed bay. It was nothing fancy, just a jagged tungsten carbide slug about the size of a Terran compact car, massing over 20 tons. Tungsten was dense, cheap to fabricate, and capable of maintaining shape even at insane impact velocities. Eli's philosophy was simple: don't overcomplicate the kill. The more moving parts, the more things could fail. David Stone had no guidance systems, no explosive warhead, no stealth plating. It was just raw mass, waiting to be hurled. The first tests had been promising. They'd rigged a half-power launch yesterday to send a smaller slug into a derelict cruiser hull drifting in the debris field. The projectile had punched through 6 decks, blown out the far bulkhead, and kept going into the void without slowing. The Coalition observers had stopped laughing after that. Marisol swung down from the scaffolding, wiping sweat from her face. "Bands are set. Gimbals calibrated. The only thing left is charging the grav coils." Eli nodded. "Let's run a dry sequence." The order rippled through the bay. The Threx technicians manned the gimbal controls, The Vraken handled structural integrity scans, and the humans clustered around the main control console. The gravitic coils began to hum, a deep vibration that resonated through the deck plating. The twin bands quivered under the invisible pull, stretching back until the launch cradle looked ready to snap. Eli watched the readouts climb. Power curve looks good. Hold at 90%. One of the Threx, a towering brute named Garath, rumbled. And this will truly pierce their shield walls? Eli glanced up at the alien scarred face. They're built to disperse energy. Lasers, plasma, particle beams. Not a 20-ton rock coming at them faster than thought. By the time their shield matrix realizes it's not energy, it's already inside the hull. Garath grunted approval. Primitive. Brutal. I like it. The bands relaxed as the power cycled down. The test was clean. Everything worked. Now all they needed was an opportunity. It came faster than expected. An hour later, Tactical reported an incoming enemy patrol group, 3 escort ships, and, more importantly, a command carrier. The carrier was heavily shielded and commanded long-range artillery. Destroying it would throw the enemy's forward positions into chaos. Perfect first target. Eli called the crew together. Listen up. This is not a warning shot. We hit them hard, fast, and without giving them time to figure out what we built. The second they realize what this can do, they'll adapt. That means we have one chance to make an impression. Marisol added, we fire once, we make it count. Miss, and we're the galaxy's biggest idiots. Hit, and they'll never forget it. The crew grinned, humans and aliens alike. Eli looked each of them in the eye. This is a deathworld solution. Our ancestors used it to drop birds from the sky. Today, we use it to drop warships from orbit. Let's get to work. As the team dispersed, Garath lingered beside Eli. Why call it? David Stone. Eli smiled faintly. Old human story. Little guy, giant enemy, one shot with a sling. The giant never saw it coming. The Threx warrior bared his teeth. Good story. Let us see if history repeats. The grav sling was loaded, the slug locked into place. In the bay's dim light, David's stone gleamed. Not with the polished perfection of a superweapon, but with the raw, ugly promise of unstoppable momentum. Tomorrow, they would fire it, and the galaxy would learn that humans didn't need elegance to win. They only needed something to throw. The first shot, the enemy carrier slid into range, just as the Resolute emerged from the shadow of the asteroid belt. On the tactical display, the massive vessel glowed a deep crimson, the color assigned to high threat, priority target. It was shaped like a crescent blade, its shield generators pulsing in steady rhythm. Escorts flanked it, smaller but still dangerous. From the carrier's perspective, the human cruiser was just another blip in the debris field. Harmless. Not worth the trouble. Perfect. Eli Vance stood in the launch bay's control booth, looking down at the grav sling. The weapon was locked in its gimbaled cradle, David Stone resting snugly in the launch groove. The tungsten slug seemed to drink in the dim light, its jagged edges promising ruin. All stations, status check, Eli ordered. Bands at full tension. Marisol reported from the engineering console. Gimbal locked on firing solution. Power levels nominal. Came the rumble from Garath at the coil controls. Ready to kill. The enemy patrol had no idea what was coming. Their long-range sensors scanned for plasma discharges and beam weapon signatures. The grav sling emitted none. To them, the Resolute was silent. Eli keyed the comms. Target is the carrier's forward shield quadrant. We want the slug through the bridge and reactor spine in one shot. No second chances. Marisol's fingers danced over the controls. Trajectory locked. Travel time, 0.08 seconds after launch. Eli nodded slowly. Less than 1/10 of a second. The enemy wouldn't even see it. The hum of the grav coils deepened, a bass vibration that resonated through every bulkhead. The twin bands stretched back, their carbon titanium weave groaning under the invisible force. The whole frame trembled, like a predator holding back the urge to pounce. On the display, the carrier turned lazily, bringing its heavy artillery to bear on some distant coalition cruiser. It didn't even raise defensive posture toward the Resolute. Eli exhaled once, slow and deliberate. Fire. The world snapped. There was no thunderclap, no blinding flash. Just a sharp, whip-like crack as the bands released, and the slug vanished into the void. 0.08 seconds later, the enemy carrier bloomed like a dying star. The slug punched through the forward shield before the generator's feedback loop could even register a solid object. The tungsten ripped through the bridge, liquefying everything in its path with sheer kinetic force. It continued straight through the central reactor chamber, shattering containment, and then punched out the aft hull. The ship's detonation was instantaneous. White-hot plasma vented into space, expanding in a roiling cloud. Shards of molten hull spun outward, colliding with two of the escort ships. One disintegrated on impact. The other drifted, burning. On the Resolute's bridge, no one spoke for a full 3 seconds. Then the comm channels erupted. Alien commanders shouted in disbelief, their voices overlapping. What was that? How did you? That is not possible. Garath just grinned, all sharp teeth. It is possible. Humans made it so. Marisol leaned back in her seat, staring at the display as the carrier's wreckage scattered. We didn't just kill it, we erased it. Eli's voice was calm. That's what happens when you stop playing by their rules. The surviving escort ship began a panicked retreat, firing wildly in the Resolute's direction. The blasts missed by kilometers. They weren't aiming, they were scared. The rest of the Coalition fleet began to advance, emboldened. On open comms, the Threx warlords were demanding schematics for the stone, while the Vrakans simply chittered in approval. Even the cautious Rao Thursday were suddenly eager to join the assault. But Eli wasn't smiling. He kept his eyes on the tactical readout, watching the wreckage drift. Somewhere out there, the enemy command would already be adapting. Marisol noticed his expression. You think they'll figure it out? Of course they will, Eli said. Every weapon has a counter. The trick is to win before they build it. She smirked faintly. Then we'd better start building more slings. The orders went out within the hour. Mobile grav slings will be mounted on fast frigates, orbital stations, even disguised on captured asteroids. The enemy's fear wasn't just from losing a carrier. It was from knowing they couldn't see the next shot coming. Still, Eli knew this first strike was more than a kill. It was a message, one the enemy would read loud and clear. Humanity doesn't need your galaxy's toys to beat you. We'll take your war and win it with rope, steel, and nerve. As the Resolute moved to rejoin the fleet, Garath stepped up beside Eli. David Stone, he rumbled. A good name. I think this galaxy will remember it. Eli didn't answer right away. He watched the last fragments of the carrier's hull tumbling into the darkness, each one a silent testament to the shot that changed the war. Finally, he said, they'll remember the first one. Let's make sure they never forget the rest. The Slingshot Doctrine. The destruction of the enemy carrier spread through the galaxy faster than any formal war communique. Coalition fleets whispered about it over encrypted channels. Merchant ships swapped exaggerated retellings in deep space docking bays. Even neutral systems spoke the name David Stone with the same reverence usually reserved for ancient superweapons. It wasn't just that the shot had worked. It was how it had worked without energy beams, antimatter cores, or quantum targeting systems. Just mass. Raw, ugly, unstoppable mass. And the humans were only getting started. 3 weeks later, from orbit, the moon Arcanes looked like a peaceful jungle world. Beneath its canopy, hidden inside a hollowed mesa, the largest grav sling yet built crouched in the shadows. Its launch cradle faced upward through a disguised opening, covered by retractable camouflage plating. Eli Vance stood on the control platform, surveying the weapon. It dwarfed the one aboard the Resolute. This model could fire projectiles the size of a shuttlecraft. The Coalition called it Hammer 1. Humans called it the Big Arm. All bands at maximum tension, Marisol Vega reported from the coil control station. Projectile loaded. Today's target wasn't a lone carrier. It was the enemy's forward logistics hub, a fortress station orbiting deep inside contested territory. Without that station, the enemy's fleets in this sector would wither. The fortress commander thought himself untouchable. Energy shields layered across the station's hull like shimmering armor. Its artillery batteries could pulverize a cruiser from half a light second away. No weapon in the Coalition's current arsenal could break it. No conventional weapon. In the last 3 weeks, the Slingshot Doctrine had spread like wildfire. Mobile grav slings had been mounted on asteroids and moonlets, on stealth frigates and hidden orbital scaffolds. Coalition engineers, once skeptical, now begged for human oversight on their own designs. The results had been spectacular. A Threx battle group, pinned down on the asteroid ring of Brachus 5, saved by a slingshot that reduced 3 enemy destroyers to molten debris. A stealth operation where a disguised sling, hidden in a derelict freighter, obliterated a command relay station in one shot. And, most famously, the Resolute's second kill, a dreadnought that had ruled a sector for decades, punched clean through at the midpoint of its hull. But this mission was bigger. It wasn't just a strike. It was a declaration. Marisol's voice came over comms. Target locked. Travel time, 0.03 seconds. Eli adjusted his headset. Coalition command, this is Vance. Hammer 1 is hot. Confirm fire authorization. A chorus of alien voices confirmed in unison. No hesitation. Not anymore. Eli looked at Garath, who stood beside him in full Threx battle armor. Once we fire, the enemy will know the doctrine works on their biggest toys. They'll come hunting for every sling we've built. Garath's eyes gleamed. Let them hunt. We will already have struck again. Eli smiled faintly. Fire. The release was silent but savage. The band snapped forward, the projectile vanished into the sky, and space itself seemed to flinch. 0.03 seconds later, the logistics hub bloomed into a blossom of light and fire. The slug didn't just penetrate, it bisected the station. The forward half spun into the void, trailing atmosphere and debris, while the aft section imploded under reactor failure. Thousands of kilometers away, coalition ships cheered over open comms. Even the stoic Vrakan allowed a few victorious clicks to echo through the channels. But the effect went deeper than destruction. Enemy fleets across the sector received the report. Their shield technology, the very thing they'd relied on for centuries, had been rendered obsolete by a weapon anyone could build with scrap and nerve. 2 months later, the war had turned. Enemy supply lines were shattered by sling strikes from impossible angles. Outposts fell without warning, their defenses bypassed by invisible projectiles. Even deep command sectors were no longer safe. A sling mounted on a comet had wiped out a fleet staging point before they'd even registered incoming fire. The enemy began retreating, consolidating their forces, and diverting resources to develop countermeasures. But countermeasures took time, and time was something the Slingshot Doctrine didn't give. Coalition war colleges began teaching Vance's rule. If it moves, it can be hit. If it exists, it can be destroyed. The last strike. The enemy's final bastion was a planet-sized fortress called Carvos Prime. Rumored to be unbreachable, it bristled with weapons and layered shields. The coalition prepared for a siege. Eli prepared something else. From 3 separate positions, a hidden asteroid sling, a stealth frigate, and an orbital moon base, 3 projectiles were launched in perfect synchronization. The slugs converged on the same shield quadrant within milliseconds of each other. The first 2 shattered the shield. The third went straight through the fortress' central command spire, detonating its planetary reactor. The battle for Carvos Prime lasted under 2 minutes. When the war ended, the coalition erected a monument on the jungle moon of Arcanis. It wasn't a statue of a hero or a grand symbol of victory. It was the original sling from the Resolute, its frame weathered and moss creeping up its legs, resting silently beneath the trees. A plaque at its base read, "Here began the doctrine that ended the war. Simplicity is strength. Ingenuity is victory." Eli Vance stood before it once, years later, long after the celebrations had faded. Garath was gone, Marisol commanded her own fleet, and the galaxy had moved on. But the lesson remained. Because somewhere, in some distant war not yet fought, someone would once again believe that victory belonged to those with the biggest guns. And humanity would be there, ready with a bigger stone.